Well, good morning. I'm Patrick Willard. I'm Senior Director at Families USA for the State and National Strategic Partnership Department. And so I'm here today to talk a little bit about coalition building and how you make a movement move forward. At Families USA, we've been involved for 30 years in healthcare advocacy with consumers, and we have focused on some of the biggest fights that have been out there. We were there when Bill Clinton was coming up with the original health care plans back in the 90s. We helped in terms of forming the Children's Health Insurance Program in the 90s, 1997. We've worked, obviously, in terms of the ACA, and as Meg Booth mentioned, we were involved in the ACA in making sure that the children's health benefit, our new executive director, Frederick Asasi, was in the Senate at that time, but was very committed to that work and has stayed committed to oral health as a benefit. And at that time, he thought it needed to be coverage for seniors, and he believed that we should continue to fight for that. So that's what we do at Families USA and where we come from. And so we work from basically 4 different pillars within families for coverage, health equity, healthcare value, and consumer engagement. All of those fit within our oral health care work. One of the other things that we do at Families USA is serve as sort of a voice for consumers. And so one of the projects that we've undertaken at Families is to get stories. People have been doing a lot of talking about stories here, I've noticed over the last several days. So one of the things that comes to my mind is I was with my mother just this last weekend, and Ron mentioned his mother, and it's Mother's Day coming up. And so, you know, it's maternal health. Mothers are in the air, and we're thinking about mothers. And so I was talking to my mother about the fact that I was coming to this and said, I'm going to be talking about oral health care and a Medicare benefit for oral health care. And she said, oh, Patrick, that's important. And I said, well, yeah, it is. And she says, no, she said, you know, here in East Tennessee, they have these remote area medical details that come out. And when they go out, they get all these people that come and they line up. And, you know, most of those people want dental care. They get in those dental chairs and they end up getting their teeth pulled. And if they could just do something about that, then that'd be better. So you tell them that your mother said that this is important. And so as my Mother's Day gift, I'm telling you that this is important. And so at Families USA, what we focus on is trying to get stories from consumers. And I have a few stories here, actually. This one's from Jennifer, who was 74 years old in Yorktown Heights, New York. I was diagnosed with Sjogren's syndrome in 2009. The disease attacks water-producing glands in the body, including the eyes and the mouth. At first, the disease attacked my eyes, and I worked with my doctors to find solutions to stop loss of eyesight. But now my mouth, throat, and teeth are suffering. In 2013, I began to replace my teeth with caps. In 2018, my dentist told me that the teeth under my caps are showing signs of decay. My caps are now falling out, and I'm missing molars. I can't afford another round of dental care. My weight is now down to 96 pounds, and my doctors have asked for a bone marrow biopsy to figure out what's going on. I'm also supposed to get a speech-language pathologist, but I'm too embarrassed to go because I'm missing my molars. And so this one story is one of dozens that we've gotten over the last few years. We've put up a website, and you can see that the website is oralhealthforall.org, that people can submit their stories to. And we're generating these stories that we then take and vet and call the individuals, make sure we have the details, and then we can use these stories when it comes time for news stories or for congressional testimony. It's one of the things that Families USA has been doing for many years and did as part of the Affordable Care Act, getting those stories, bringing the people out and letting them tell their stories in the public or tell their stories in testimony before the public. And that's one of the vital pieces, obviously, that everyone seems to understand that we need as part of this effort going forward. It's important because, you know, in terms of the stories fit in and give us a basis to humanize the issue itself. But this session is focused on coalition building. And so I titled my portion, The Usual Suspects, Strange Bedfellows, and Game Changers. And so I think when I think about coalition building, I start with the usual suspects. The usual suspects are in this room. You're the usual suspects. You all get together and talk about oral health. And there are other subgroups of usual suspects. There's the kids groups, and Children's Dental Health Project is part of the kids groups that also includes Georgetown Children's Center and others. There are the aging groups. AARP would be part of the aging or senior groups that all focus on those issues out there. But those are the usual suspects. At Families USA, we convene a group which is the Medicaid Coalition that brings together some of the kids groups and some of the senior groups and the pediatric physicians and family physicians, as well as the American Cancer Society, AARP, and other groups to talk about issues related to Medicaid. And so it's a little bit bigger usual suspects coalition. This is an example of what we would call sort of the disease group's usual suspect coalition. So the usual suspects coalitions get together and talk and can pretty well agree about where they want to head on these issues. But there's a lot of talking to themselves and a lot of talking in silos. And so, the next stage would be to move to the Strange Bedfellows Coalition, which is really where you want to sort of show that there is more to this group than just the usual suspects. And so one of the examples of a really strong, I think, Strange Bedfellows Coalition was a group that was created back in 2007, which was called the Divided We Fail organization. The focus was to make healthcare the leading issue in the 2008 presidential campaign. The notion was that the healthcare system was broken, that working together, groups could fix the healthcare system, but divided we fail. And the group included AARP, the nation's largest senior organization, the Business Roundtable, the largest corporate organization out there, NFIB, the largest organization for small businesses, and SEIU, which was the largest labor organization. So you had very different groups coming together and getting behind an advertising campaign and political campaign to raise the issue of healthcare all across the country. And it was a campaign that even had its own mascot. You can see here that you have something that looks, well, it kicks like a donkey, and it's got the front and the trunk of an elephant. And I called it the Donkophant, but its real name was Champ, and it's not red, and it's not blue, it's purple. And so they had Champ go out and as a mascot and participate at watch parties for the debates and at rallies and always talking about the importance of the healthcare issue as a part of the Divided We Fail campaign. And so I think, getting a Strange Bedfellows coalition and thinking about who we need to add to our coalition, if you look at the groups that are signed on to our group, you don't see the Chamber of Commerce, you don't see the business roundtables. Where are some of the business groups that we need to be thinking about? Who are, do we need to have a sportsman's group in there? I don't know. But there are different groups that you can add that actually give a different flavor and show more about the diversity of the organization. The other thing is that when you can do a Strange Bedfellow group, you can actually show a shift within the debate. And so one of the things that happened as part of this debate around the ACA was after the passage after the election, to make sure that Congress was paying attention and that people understood that now was a time to focus on health care. Families USA worked with AHIP, the American Health Insurance Plans, to put together an ad that brought back the stars that defeated the Clinton bill back in the 1990s. They brought back Harry and Louise. Only now, Harry and Louise were in favor of health care reform. And so they put together the ads with the original actors and put it back out there and spent a few $1 million just to get it out and get it on YouTube and other places, but to show that there was a shift within the debate and really draw attention to that shift. And finally, you've got to have champions. And you know, we were fortunate at Families USA to have Senator Barack Obama come and speak to us in 2007 and address his plans for health care. And then once he was elected, be able to go back and reach out and make that case for why health care reform was important. Now, what we've got now, over the course of the last year, since the last Santa Fe Salon, which was the first one I'd attended, and I think the first one that Families USA had participated in, we've obviously focused much more on these issues. And so, obviously, the notion of the medically necessary coverage is an important one. And we see that as a way of getting this issue in front of members of Congress and a way of sort of showing some bipartisan support for it. Because obviously over the next 2 years, what we really need to focus on is getting the message out and trying to make the group as large as possible. So the medically necessary effort that Eric has mentioned and has shepherded us through has helped us to find a way within the administration and helped us find a way to talk to both sides of the aisle in Congress about this issue. And so I think it's an important piece of the overall long-term effort, but we don't need to lose sight of the fact that it is a long-term effort, and the long-term effort is to get the dental benefit in Medicare. And so this is one way of talking about it. It's a way of getting it on the agenda. I think Eric makes a good point that politically there may be a need for the administration to show some willingness to work on this. I also am taken with Bill Scanlon's reference to CBO having to work with oven mitts. I actually think it's more like a catcher's mitt. Every so often a pitch comes in and they catch it. And when that happens, suddenly things start coming along. Now, they're not really good catchers, but every so often a pitch comes in and they can catch it. And so I think that this is an important piece for us to focus on, and I think it gives us the time to build the coalition that we're going to need for the long-term effort going forward. Right now, we have 3 bills that have been introduced specifically on a benefit. The white paper that was produced last year with the help of the Center for Medicare Advocacy and Oral Health America and other groups, some members here, Judy Jones participated in that white paper as well, was used to put together the Medicare Dental Benefit Act that has been introduced by Senator Cardin. And we're working on the Hill to draw attention to that. We're looking for House sponsors. We also have other bills that have been introduced by Representative Doggett, who is the chair of the Health Subcommittee on the Ways and Means Committee, which gives us some access to the possibility of committee hearings in the future. Senator Casey, I believe, just dropped the Senate version of that bill yesterday. And then the Seniors Have Eyes, Ears, and Teeth Act, which Representative Roy Willard has introduced. So there is legislation that we've been able to get introduced. It is focused on a Medicare Part B benefit, which is what we want, and I think that there is that helps us to actually have the marker there, which is what we need both for grassroots efforts to tell people what they should ask their members of Congress to support, but also for building awareness within the committee staff on the Hill. Now, what we need to focus on then is sort of the next effort. In the 2018 elections, healthcare was the #1 issue, far and away. And Eric mentioned the fact, and I think that keeps the pressure on the administration and others to make sure that they're paying attention to healthcare. But we need to find ways to take advantage of that for oral health in the 2020 elections going forward. And I think that one of the places we need to think about how we do that is in the conversations around Medicare for All. We are not in a position right now to change or to make oral health the biggest issue of the 2020 elections. These things are being baked right now, and we can see that Medicare for All is rising as a key issue, and people are jumping on board on that. But what we need to focus on is the fact that when we start a conversation about Medicare for All, we're talking about Medicare. And what Medicare doesn't cover is oral health. And therefore, we need to make people start talking about oral health as part of that. The Bernie Sanders bill does cover oral health as part of a Medicare for All benefit. So we're talking about expanding coverage for all Americans to include oral health. That's a good thing. The bill that's offered for the Medicare buy-in that's being offered by Senator Stabenow for the 50-plus group just keeps the regular Medicare benefit. So it's not covering oral health. So why is it not covered? That's an essential benefit. We need to talk about it, and we need to get people to talk about these things on the stump. And when they're asked about what are some of the things about Medicare that people need to focus on going forward, that will help us keep the conversation going forward as we get into 2020. That will help us to be able to think about ways to raise it within the 2020 elections, and with groups that sponsor debates like AARP, we can think about ways that we can incorporate oral health as part of the overall questions. I raise Medicare for All, but I do think that one of the things we need to think about is the fact that it might be a popular liberal approach in the primaries, but not all of the country is behind it. And so I want to make sure that we're talking about oral health in relation to Medicare for All, rather than talking about all the problems or all the cost involved in Medicare for All. Medicare for All, it seems, is an important issue for the Democratic primary. It's not necessarily the most important factor people have been thinking about in 2018, and so I think we're going to see some of that going forward in the future. The main point is that we need, during this time, to build the list of coalition supporters, to build the coalition itself so that it incorporates more strange bedfellow groups, to make sure that there is a steady drumbeat of request for Medicare dental benefit. We don't need to get into the weeds about the reimbursement rate and all of that conversation at this time. We need to have a very simple message, and I think the CDHP folks made that pretty clear. A very simple message that is that the Medicare benefit is needed. We need to do it now, and that is our message until we get to a point where we're ready to move. I think that Donna Shalala Congresswoman Shalala was right on point that nothing's going to happen over the next 2 years, and so it gives us a chance for the ground building and the basic messaging to go forward. I do think that we need to, as we get into 2020, raise it within the presidential election, but I also think we need to think about how it's going to fit with the Surgeon General's report. The last Surgeon General's report came out in 2000. It was a great report and has been referenced in a number of ways, but there was not the possibility for an immediate action step because you had an administration leaving office. And I think we need to think about how this report is going to be framed and actually use some of the data that has already been shared from Bruce Dye about the aging population, what's happening right now, and talk about that even before the report comes out. So that by the time the report comes out and it makes those points even clearer, we're in a better position then to transition to the next phase, which is going to be really working for the benefit. Finally, I will say coalition building's hard, and it can get messy, and people just need to try and stay focused on the main message and the main issue. And that takes time to be able to accomplish. The question was asked, is 10 years the time frame that you need to focus on? I don't know. I will say that from Families USA's perspective, to go from the Clinton era to the Obama era was more than 10 years, and it took, and there's still a lot of work to be done going forward. So my main message here is get focused, find more friends to bring into the coalition, keep the message simple, and as my mother said, this is very important. Thank you.